Hi, I'd like to welcome everybody today to our first in-person Lunch with Layne. And my very special guest today is Mr. Leonard Grill, who is the founding director of Student Legal Services in 1977. And Leonard, I'm just going to do a very brief introduction here. Let our viewers know that we are appropriately social distanced during this time, taking all precautions and everything else. But I'm so excited that we actually get to do an in-person interview today. And Leonard, my understanding is you had gone to Bowling Green undergrad. Is that correct?
That's right. Bowling Green is in Northwest Ohio, not to be confused with Bowling Green, Kentucky, which people often do. And,
I made that mistake myself.
Bowling Green opens its football season against Tennessee this year.
Interesting matchup rivalry, right? On that. And in 1975, you graduated from the University of Ohio Northern. Is that right?
That's correct.
And interesting nickname, right? Did you have for Ohio Northern?
Well, we joke about it. We call it "Oh no."
Oh no. I love that. And you were admitted to the bar, and you actually practiced beginning for a Mr. Alexander,
yes,
I believe.
Yeah.
Is that right? And you did family law as well as criminal law?
Family law, criminal law, a little bit of civil law, but I did that for a year and a half, and I got very unhappy in Steubenville, Ohio. Snow, slush, freezing weather. And I said, I'm going to Florida.
I think you made the right choice. That's why many of us are here in Florida, I think, right? And very fortunately, you made that decision and you became the what I'm going to call the founding director of Student Legal Services in 1977, I believe.
Right. Well, there was a search, and I happened to see the ad for it in the Florida Bar News that the university wanted an attorney to create an office of student legal services. I said, well, that sounds very interesting. And I went through the hiring process and was selected in the fall of 1977. And we didn't open for the first clients until November 7th of 77, because we had to have approval at that time because it's a group legal service. The Florida Bar had to review your plans, the people that work there and so on. And because things were a little stricter then. And we got that approval and we took our first clients in November 1977. Just myself and one assistant.
That is amazing. So it was yourself and one assistant, right?
One secretarial assistant.
I'm kind of curious, how did it grow, over the years while you were here, Leonard?
Well, I was always trying to get help.
That sounds, you had one attorney for how many thousands, tens of thousands of students, right?
I believe it was like 26 or 28,000 students.
Wow.
At that time.
Wow.
And
you needed help.
Very much so. We were all a little apprehensive about whether there would be a demand that would exceed the capacity of us to handle. But things worked out well. I sought out a number of law students. So we had like 4 legal interns that were helping me that first year or two. And then student government gave us authority to hire another attorney. That was David Gallant. Dave worked here for a number of years and then went on to be a prosecutor locally. And then eventually he was a judge.
The judge.
Yeah.
And I was going to say rest his soul, right? Passed away a few years ago.
Dave and Colleen and Larry Gibbons, our third attorney of all, gone off to the happy hunting grounds.
Sure, yeah.
Inappropriate, sorry.
No, that's no, with all due respect, right? Yeah, for all of them. And then Larry later on became director, right? After yourself.
The director himself, yeah.
Director himself. Thank you, for that history. I'm curious, Leonard, and going to a little bit of a deep dive because, you're we were going to say godfather of student legal services. What kind of constituents and groups were you reaching out to in the early days, to put together the student legal services?
Okay, we were in uncharted territory.
Sure.
Because there was nothing here. And I sought out help from a couple of different programs that had successful student programs, if that's what you're referring to. I've long since forgotten the names of the 2 gentlemen that I basically copied their programs, which was the University of Indiana, a very successful student legal service program at the time, and University of Northern Illinois, had a program. So I visited both their campuses, and the lawyers at those schools were very gracious. Matter of fact, the students will find that most lawyers are very gracious all the time and will gladly talk to students about careers and so on. I always encourage people just to go in and ask, walk in the front door and say, yeah, I want to ask Mr. Smith about possibly working here as an intern and about his career and so on. And they'll usually wrinkle their nose and not understand what you're saying, but
right.
as long as you're dressed nicely,
It doesn't hurt, right? Reach out and make those connections is what you're saying, right? Telling our students.
walk in the door.
Thank you.
Don't even call, just walk.
Cold call, absolutely, right? Which takes a lot of courage for our students now because they live in a virtual world. You know, they're sending out the emails,
Oh,
but you
yeah.
feel there's no right competition, or there's really there's no what's the right word I'm looking for here? Nothing like going door to door, right? Introducing yourself, dropping off your resume, and
Yeah. I can't recommend enough because
Thank you.
it's so easy to hit delete.
And we're inundated, right, these days with so many emails that, yeah, I think you're exactly
I
right.
have my friends that get hundreds of emails a day. They can't possibly even go through them all. So you get lost in the shuffle.
Oh, Leonard, I have to ask you, so I believe the dates that you're giving us, you would have been under Dr. Art Sandine?
Art Sandine was a gem. I think he's still in town.
He is still in town, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. And give a shout out to Art and Sue, both,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful people, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
I like him so much. He was a great, brilliant leader
Yeah,
and educator. And Tom Goodell was the dean.
Tom Goodell, yeah.
Now, I don't know what happened to Tom. He moved to Colorado a few years after I got here.
Did you find a lot of support internally? Because I know you're building it from the ground up, right?
Yeah. The student government funded the program. Very low level, by the way.
And no one is here, right, to make a killing. We should
Yeah.
point that out later.
Yeah.
Hopefully their heart is in serving students.
We were poverty lawyers. Meaning we were in poverty, but in any event, it was a good time. And student government was our biggest supporter. And I was always smart enough to, when I needed a student assistant, I would always hire someone who was in student government. So they would see, they would know what we do because it was a mystery. And it's probably still a mystery for you all, for most of the students here. They have to discover student legal services. They have to find promotional materials or your videos, which are tremendous, by the way. I've watched a number of them.
Thank you. Gosh, we really appreciate that. We're doing them on the fly, the learning curve for us, Leonard. You know, these days we're filming them, and I kid you not, you know, if we're not using this, we're using a phone. And we live in wonderful times, and sometimes the audio is not, you know, but I tell everybody, just film them, put them out. Right? Let's get the info as quick as we can out. Let's make sure it's accurate, right?
Right.
And you know, we put disclaimers on everything. Don't rely on just this. But yeah, I think we're living in a golden age, you know, in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. We're way past when I came here, there was no such thing as computers. There actually were. There were computers, but they weren't computers that were functional on a daily office basis. We had IBM Selectric typewriters.
Wow. I remember the Selectrics very well.
And carbon paper.
Yeah, huge, right?
Yeah.
So you were using carbon paper when you did pleadings, is that right?
Certainly.
Wow. Yeah, that's a different world for my students. I'm not even sure they understand putting the carbon paper in between the paper to make multiple copies, right? As you're tapping it out on a Selectric.
Right.
Wow, that is amazing. So you're actually typing rather than cutting and pasting, right?
No,
Every pleading from originally.
Yeah, the advent of word processing occurred, I think, sometime around 74, 75, and they were on cards that you had to feed through card readers. It was a ridiculous primitive process. I preparing for this, I thought of the first computer we got, and somebody gave it to the office, and it just sat there because nobody knew how to use it, because they said, oh, it runs on MS-DOS. And I said, MS-DOS?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, exactly. And for our students, and I will mention this, MS-DOS is pre-Windows.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Pre-Windows, right, beforehand. And Leonard's even talking about the punch cards that were used, IBM 36180s. If we have anybody that's actually listening to this, right?
Yeah.
I believe were a couple of the common computers that were used on the campus here back in the day, right?
Right.
And you had to, I believe it was it was at a penny a minute, something like that was charged. I forgot what the rate, maybe for free but like you said, it was so cumbersome, right? That it was almost unusable.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
It wasn't until Apple came along that things started to change. And then, of course, Windows got invented and everything changed.
I mean, it's really interesting, this history of computers, and everything. Absolutely right. So I want to know, what were those early cases that were coming in and how they compare with what we're doing now?
And probably exactly the same. Landlord-tenant law was obviously the biggest thing. In that early era and extending until relatively recent times, apartments in Gainesville were rare. You had to search. People had competition to find an apartment or a room in a house. And the search went on very early, starting in late December, January. And we would attempt to educate people about the problems of signing contracts and joint and several liability, which I'm sure is still an issue in Florida law, meaning that you're responsible for the entire apartment if you sign that lease.
Right.
We had to drill that into students, saying, be careful who you're living with. I created at that time a roommate rental agreement, whereby I wanted all of the roommates to sign an agreement saying that we were going to live by these rules. We were going to pay the rent. We weren't going to escape early, and we knew that we had to pay the rent even if we left. And like I say, there were tough times, and it was only later on that the concept of a separate lease for each individual renting a room in an apartment. Back in those days, people shared a bedroom. If you can imagine, students today would probably have a heart attack.
I would, we have these about them. They're like 4-4s, 4-2s, where there's a common area and a bedroom,
right?
But they're not sharing a bedroom, right?
That's right.
And we run into enough. I think we may still be using the version, Leonard, of your roommate agreement. We also strongly, I'll tell my students, please feel free to download it from our website.
Right.
Probably the same version that you're using or we're using, right? And maybe modified slightly, but thank you for that, because we're still using it a lot. And we think it's prevented a lot of our roommate issues.
Yeah, you have to. Because it's often the first time that students are doing this business transaction on their own. They may not be fully cognizant of the responsibilities entailed in that. And the more that it's brought home, the reality of, I'm signing this lease, I'm an adult, it may affect my credit, I could get sued. And we had multitude of cases of landlords suing tenants. I don't know if it's common at this time, but back in the 80s, it was a frequent occurrence. And some of those landlords are still around town, by the way. I know them personally.
Yeah, we'll be careful. On this recording, I know I'm always careful, on this.
We're not going to name names.
No. And I tell everybody, the students come in here. Now, what I would tell students, and I want to piggyback off what you're saying. Students, if you have, before you sign the lease, come see us.
Yes.
Not only, right, Leonard? Come see us. Let's be proactive instead of reactive before you have a problem. Because once you sign that lease, you're going to be paying $8,000 to $10,000 typically now, right, for that course of a year. I know it's gone up so much. Come see us. Not only can we look over the lease to make sure you understand the legalese in it, but the second component is we can look up that complex for you. And we can tell you what complaints that we've had. Yeah, I don't think UF wants us to get into, well, believe me, I don't think I'd be endorsing any landlord, first of all, but bad mouthing or endorsing. What I tell students is that we have this complex, we've had this number of issues, over the years. Our students are smart, and I think that's the objective kind of
Right.
review, that we do.
Oh,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that that's a great idea, like you talked about. God, there was something I forgot the question that I had to you, on that, but how were the students in those days? Were they receptive?
Very. Yeah.
And-
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
People don't change. I often get a kick out of the younger friends that I like to do trivia nights, and we'll be out there, and many of the younger people, 20s, think that they've invented everything new. Oh, we're going to fight for this. And I say, well, back in the 60s, we fought for the same thing. And it was just the same. And so the students, you have students from the 70s and 80s and 90s, I'm certain are exactly the same as they are now. The same problems, same worries, same concerns.
I wanted to ask you about it in the 1970s and 80s when you were director here. I'm sure that a landlord would never scarf or keep a student security deposit, right, Leonard? That would never, ever happen, right? In any way, shape, or form.
No, there was never a problem with security deposit. That was a constant issue.
Constant issue.
Trying to get the security deposits back.
How much were they in those days? What was typical amounts you remember?
$100.
Oh gosh! Wow, fighting over $100.
Maybe 150, or sometimes a month's rent.
Okay, I'm doing a calculator on it. Maybe that was equal to 300 or 400 now. I'm guessing, something around that amount. How about criminal cases?
We didn't actually represent people in court on criminal cases. We would attempt to advise them. I had a number of local attorneys, they're still in practice, by the way, that I would send a student to if they had a particularly tricky problem. That attorney, we would not pay them for the service, but just as a consultation to try to help them through this issue and to get some advice as to where to go. But we didn't do criminal. We would do traffic citations, and we did quite a lot of them. And when I take that back, we did we couldn't negotiate with state attorneys. And I negotiated quite a bit of cases down to just doing community service or just getting the case dismissed after they completed the service. It was interesting at the time. There were a lot of students that would go to Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And New Orleans police are quite legendary for grabbing people and
not always having the same degree of tolerance that we encounter in Gainesville. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I'm putting it very graciously.
So we get a student come back and say, oh my God, I was arrested for whatever, I won't say. But so I ended up trying to call the prosecutor in New Orleans, and they say, oh, just send us the money, we'll wipe this thing off. That's all they wanted.
Was money.
Yes.
Wow.
And it would disappear.
Wow.
I mean, it wasn't a payoff. It was just a fine.
A fine. Right. Yeah. Exactly. No, you did great work. So you're actually taking care of these cases around. And Leonard, to let you know, we do the same thing these days.
Yeah.
And we do not go to court, but if we do our job right, almost always we can settle it out of court as long as it's not a very serious felony.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. To give you the
exactly
idea.
The same.
So community service, exactly right. We're very big on that. Right. Did you get a lot of what were our number one case here? Everybody always asks in terms of criminal case. And I go, no, our students are really good people. It's the underage possession of alcohol. So for us under the age of 21, we get a lot of those, coming in because the police undercover, they go in the bars and clubs and they check people's ID and fake IDs.
I don't remember that as a major problem then. Not that it wasn't, it's just,
Going back in history here, Rathskeller, I'm trying to remember when it burned down, in fact.
I remember that
I
well.
remember that well.
I
Yeah.
remember that day, Johnson Hall. That was the biggest event on campus in history. Because all the records, all the financial records of the university went up in smoke.
Oh, wow. As well as.
Yes, it was a major building and it was old and the Rathskeller was in the lower in the basement.
Yeah.
Great place for
Great place to
hangout
hang out.
students
Yeah.
and the business end, the finance office. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, folks who know better, but gone. It was a 5-alarm fire
Wow.
all over town. Everybody knew it.
What year do you remember approximately on that?
I can tell you, because I took my kids down to see the flames. We lived very close. They were 5 and 6, 35 years ago. 30 to 35 years ago.
Sounds right. Yeah. The only reason that I know about the Rathskeller is, my dad had gone here. We had lived on campus at Flavet Housing. So I actually hung out in the Rathskeller as a kid, I know going back in the day. So it has near and dear memories for me too,
Right.
Losing it as well. But yeah, you were living it, at the time. Thank you. Wow. I wanted to ask you, we're talking about getting UF Student Legal Services off the ground. You've talked about it. Original office, how big was it compared to what we have now?
3 rooms.
Big rooms like this?
Well, it was here,
Okay.
sort of.
In the Wright Union?
Yeah, no, I was here in this
Oh,
this square footage that I'm sitting in. This was at one time my office, this little space. But it also was one time we changed things around depending on the days. We had that waiting room there, just like it is now. No, not just like it is, but same footage. This office, and I think one more. It wasn't a lot of space. And over the years, we managed to get the union and the board to go through that. It's funny, I like to look around the names of the union, and I remember, of course, I was here when J. Wayne Wright wasn't president, he was gone, but he was still a fixture on campus.
sure.
So I actually have a direct connection with J. Wayne Wright, and of course, William Ryan, the ballroom here, that's who I worked with. Bill Ryan.
Oh, go Ryan.
Ran the union and controlled the boards, and you had to deal with him to get more space. It was fun.
This is prior to Dave Kratzer and General Kratzer and others,
Oh,
right?
Dave Kratzer, Dave was much. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, a lot later. I don't want to give, and I'll let everybody know, Wright Union and myself, I won't mention the year, are about exactly the same age.
How
To
about
give you
that?
an idea, yeah. So Bill Ryan and the individuals, that.
Yeah.
There's a joke about President Wright's. Somebody had gone up to him and goes, "Are you named after the building?"
Yeah.
So, yeah. Going back a few years here, you have really. Wow, Leonard, this history is really invaluable to us to know all of this, what you went through. I'm going to call it the earlier days, not early, but earlier days.
Right.
You actually worked with some of the movers and shakers too for this campus. I mean,
A lot of them.
yeah, they're really, got different things off the ground, right? Different initiatives. Was there any resentment or was there any blowback on student legal in the early days? I've talked to Dr. Sandine about it, and he said, that the university was not super happy that students wanted to assert their rights, early on.
Well, the administration may not have been super happy, but everyone else was more than pleased. I never ran into overt opposition.
That's great.
Ever.
That's great. From admin, right?
From admin.
Yeah.
And Dr. Sandine was always gracious and just everybody. You didn't want to step on their toes.
Oh, no.
You're not allowed to sue them.
Right. It's a conflict, right? Because we work at the university, right? We're not allowed to sue. What is it? State of Florida, any of its entities, right? Yeah.
Right.
And the university.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. Thank you. So there was really no conflicts from that point,
No.
right? Moving forward. Sounds like you actually had excellent support. Getting the word out, like you said, was the main things that students knew about us.
Well, the Alligator was very supportive. I had numerous interviews with people in the Alligator and certain on-campus magazines. I remember there was one magazine, the Orange and Blue magazine at one time, and they did a little profile of me in there. I might have a copy.
I want to see that. I really want to see that if we can find it
I'll have to
somewhere.
look for it.
And I was letting everybody know too, just to show real quick, we have this history of the UF Division of Student Affairs, and just wanted to show this to everybody. And Leonard is actually prominently featured in the write-up in the book here, and served from 1977 to 1989. So yeah, good portion of time, Leonard. Thank you for your service to this. I was going to say not only to our office, to our university, to our students, and now our very distinguished alumni. Right? You've had a lot of distinguished individuals come through this office.
Quite a few.
Yeah. Very highly placed judges now, and legislators, and some others from what I hear.
It's actually a surprise. A lot of the student government leaders at the time, they have their career in politics in the back of their minds. Young woman running for the Democrat for governor.
Right.
Was a student government alum and a law school alum.
Yeah, you were right about that. I'm going to take a brief break, if that's okay, Leonard.
Please.
And we're going to do a part 2 here. We're going to get into your Shands experience in
That'll be wonderful.
healthcare law. So